he was paid for it in copies of it. So they just produced and gave him like 40 copies. And it's like, that doesn't.
So what you're saying is Edgar Allan Poe got paid in exposure.
Yep.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
got exposure.
That's exactly.
Ah, yes. The most backhanded of artist currency.
Though I will say, paper cost a lot more back then than it does
Yeah.
today. It's not you
Mhm.
could just go down to Kinko's and pick up a ream of printer paper, like
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, that whole process was an absolute nightmare back then. And so, I mean, was it, a financial investment for them to pay him in that way? Absolutely. But did it put, food on his table? No, because at that point he wasn't well known yet.
Hear me out. What if he takes one book or 3 books and sells it to one friend, and that friend each sells it to 2 friends, right? He gets another friend, sells them 3 copies of the book.
Oh, God.
I'm just saying it's perfect.
I don't think that pyramid scheme works so well.
Well, it's more like a triangle scheme.
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of KV Theater Podcast. Today's episode is all about spaghetti westerns in anime. So, basically, the whole genre of westerns and animes and gluing them together to make this fun time. Now, before we get started, I want to introduce some of the people who are going to help me out with this one. Over here to my side is going to be...
I am Ben, and I'm the ElPenguin.
Right, and over next to him is going to be our buddy.
What's up? I'm Brandon, also known as Tomatoman.
And you know him, you love him, and he's also over here by my side.
Ridiculous. I appreciate you. Hello, my name is D&Daine. I go by D&Daine on the internet.
All right, and once again, as always, I am your host, Leo the Geek Scorpio. Now, before we get started, let's take a quick trip over to the magical merch booth.
Yeah! Woo! Hooray! I'm on my way. I'm on my way.
Whoa.
Here we are over the magical merch booth. Now, today, just like what we've been doing for most of November, is we're all showing our stuff for Extra Life.
What? Extra Life?
If you've gotten to this podcast, you may have unfortunately missed the chance to be part of the TTP RPG OEPEL. There's other acronyms. Anyway, it's a semi-annual tabletop RPG for the viewing audience for Extra Life. But that doesn't mean that Extra Life is done. November is a big month for them. And I know that Zombie Hand had to push her stuff back, so she's going to be doing within the next couple weeks our Scream stream for Extra Life. And Extra Life is a charity that we do support or pretty heavily. It is about Dane, you know a bit more about this than I do.
Yeah, so it helps support the Children's Miracle Network hospitals. These are a number of hospitals nationwide that all help sick children. The campaign does go all year round, so if you miss November, you can still donate if you so choose, and have the ability and the inclination to do so. It goes until the very end of the year, and all donations will count up to that point, at which point in the new year it will roll over into next year's Extra Life campaign.
Mm-hmm. Many of us over here at Gaming Theater do support Extra Life, and we all have our own little options for it. And throughout the month of November, we're going to, for any Extra Life Patreon that we're working with, we'll be announcing there when they're doing their streams and what kind of options that they're doing for their stuff. And it's a good cause to support. So if you feel the need to help donate some of it, you can just donate there. Links for our Extra Life stuff will be in the description. With that being said, let's get back to the show. Okay, so today's episode is about spaghetti westerns and anime. So, in anime, every so often you'll get a series or an episode or two, or actually whole story arcs based similarly around westerns, more specifically the spaghetti westerns. So, in order to explain what that kind of genre comes up as, we're gonna have to go back in the day to explain how that how the genres of westerns sort of came about. Westerns are kind of interesting because they're the only genre that is set and created in their own time period. So, for example, science fiction, we can all say that Mary Shelley from Frankenstein started that back in the 1800s. Hard to say when horror started as the genre, and comedies and dramas have been around for since at least the ancient Greeks and even beyond before that. However, for westerns specifically, they had that genre started roughly about in the 1800s in the United States during the western frontier. What would happen in that time frame, which is about roughly around, most people say, about the 1860s or so. People in the East Coast, for in their big cities and such, about what's happening in the frontier and the frontier lifestyle for it. Now, what will happen in this time frame is paper. Paper becomes really a lot easier for it to be made and produced. Now, the reason why that's important is now that their paper is easy to be produced, you have a lot of more people able to write on the papers because now it's not as a detriment. So much so, some people get lost to the shuffle of time with how many writings on there. Famously, Edgar Allan Poe did not make it see a dime, even though he's one of the most prolific poets of the medium.
Another fun note about that too is on one of his best works, if I remember right. He was paid for it in copies of it. So they just produced and gave him like 40 copies. And it's like, that doesn't.
So what you're saying is Edgar Allan Poe got paid in exposure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exposure.
That's exactly.
Ah, yes. The most backhanded of artist currency.
Though I will say, paper cost a lot more back then than it does
Yeah.
today. It's not you could just go down to Kinko's and pick up a ream of printer paper, like
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, that whole process was an absolute nightmare back then. And so, I mean, was it, a financial investment for them to pay him in that way? Absolutely. But did it put, food on his table? No, because at that point he wasn't well known yet.
hear me out. What if he takes one book or 3 books and sells it to one friend, and that friend each sells it to 2 friends, right? He gets another friend, sells them 3 copies of the book.
Oh, God.
I'm just saying it's perfect.
I don't think that pyramid scheme works so well.
Well, it's more like a triangle scheme.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it just sounds like the only option they got left.
Sorry, did I say scheme? I meant plan. Triangle plan.
More like a series of 3 angles that are pointed in various directions.
Yeah, and the money starts at the top, and it just kind of trickles down, right?
Look,
Yeah.
there's 3 points here. There's Edgar, his book, and the money, and the only thing he wants out of it is the money.
One for each of his names: Edgar, Allan, and Poe.
This is true.
So that being said, though, now this is going to be the one of 2 big revolutions in the writing industry because of resources. This is the first time because of the Industrial Revolution starts coming up, and you start getting paper being made. The second time will be in the 20s when pulp comes up, and that's the reason why we have what's called pulp novels. Still related to this because they would still continue writing about westerns and the frontier experience. Keep in mind, by the time pulp novels come out in the 20s, and people forget this part, I think the only one that really touches this is the game Red Dead Redemption 1. It takes place in early 1910s. The Wild West for people in the 20s wasn't even a decade ago. That would be like us talking in the 2020s talking about not even the 90s, like just 2010s. So with that, the westerns as a genre start going through there. But westerns tend to also jump other genres. Famously, they even had their own superhero line. Zorro, the Lone Ranger. And with that, westerns start getting a little more saturated on there. They're kind of being, you would read a western because it's kind of black and white, especially in a lot of the writings there. Now you get into the 50s and television starts becoming big, and you have various different western styles were out there. Films like Shane, movies or TV shows like The Rifleman and Paladin, which let me tell you, that now I'm like, oh, this is going to be a nice little sordid adventure. Nope, that's a guy with a rifle named Paladin. I got that one wrong.
I do think it's kind of interesting that what we think of as the sort of Wild West time is realistically 30 years. I think most historians track it around 1860, 65 in that area until about 1895, right?
Hmm.
And like that's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
When I think about the Wild West era, it's this sprawling, expansive, multi-year. I mean, 30 years is still a good amount of time. Don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
it always feels like it should be something grander or like more than it
But
is.
I'm also thinking about that. If you stop and consider just like if the late 1800s was like the Western time, let us remember that early 1800s was looking like Hamilton.
That's
And
true.
it's like, man, that was a huge transition. Just like, we need to modernize. Yep, we modernize around guns.
That's America.
Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think part of the whole thing with it is, like, it's more about how like, we forget just how rapidly things did expand at that time, and that's really why it's, such a short period, but yet so much happened, and we seem to forget that because I always feel like the Old West was like a 70-year time frame, but like Dane says, 30 years, that's all it was.
Right?
But because so much happened so quickly, it was quote unquote a wild time. And I think that's kind of where the term comes from,
Hmm.
potentially. But I mean, that's, I guess, also just my 2 cents on the whole
Yeah.
mentality of it.
So back on the point for that one though, here's where we go up into cinema. Now, westerns start seeming to be dying off a little bit. You end up getting to producers and such, which are kind of going with the flow. In the 50s, the big things that are coming up is sort of rebellion, like Rebel Without a Clause, and teenagers mostly having, until the 50s, teenagers weren't even considered as a subject. You were a child or you're an adult. And now we have a kind of a area where there's teens going in, modding cars and having their getting on, old man Griffith's fence and you get off my lawns
That's really
and
true.
just hanging out with people. And Elvis is starting to become big and rock and roll and such. And so they follow with the trends for it. And that's not anything new. We've seen that in any kind of cinema and television. So westerns are just seem more passe. Now, the reason why pulp novels are important, another big genre in the pulp era is noir. Noir doesn't have a black and white hero. Sometimes your hero is barely making it through the day. He's two whiskey sours out from being completely passed out, but he's got to deal. He's got to go over there and deal with those thugs. What
I
we start?
do.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I just love the way you phrase that. Is that it did not have a black and white era. When I think of noir, I think of it
It was
exclusively in
a
black and
black and
white.
white.
That's not what you meant, obviously,
Right,
but
right, right, right. No, um,
I found that a little bit funny.
Honestly, the wordplay of that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
so, but you have a new introduction to the anti-hero. And famously, what starts where the anti-hero in a Western genre starts revitalizing it. Probably the most famous ones are Sergio Leone, who did several different films on it. The most famous of the Western films in the Western genre, and probably the most famous Western of all time, is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And some people,
Yeah.
it's so famous, people forget that that's actually the third part of a trilogy. But then you have all these westerns, and they got the nickname spaghetti westerns because they would be produced and made in Italy, and that's
Huh.
where you get the term spaghetti western for. It's a western genre film that they made in the highlands of Italy.
I,
There's
I
different
get
reasons
it.
for that.
Wasn't it cost efficiency was a big part of it, I bet.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because you would need like a large list of extras and such, and so there were times where where the only American actors on there were whatever main character had to be was the American actor. Everyone else was played by Italians,
Hmm.
and they would have different. And so people, Clint Eastwood just ended up going there to film his scenes and such, and took care of it and did that. But all the other extras and all the other cowboys on there, all Italian people. But because of the highlands that are in Italy, those sort of semi-arid deserty areas, which is famous for like a lot of westerns, stay that way for kind of a long time. Sometimes you just hear environmental shifts in things. In the 90s, video game companies started moving to Texas because it was a drier climate, so they didn't have to worry about winter shutting them down for it. Plus, like id Software moved themselves there back at one point in time, but then other companies started going there. So there was in the 90s there was a boom of video game developers in Texas. But then you have so in this case, films are being made in Italy because they like the Western genre. They will produce them, and it was just much more cost effective for it. So throughout the 60s and 70s, you have these westerns all made in Italy. Not unheard of. In the 80s, you start seeing a bunch of action films being made in Thailand or the Philippines because for the same reason. Corman, I'm trying to remember his name, but the Corman films famously did almost everything in the Philippines for that. Roger Corman, that's the name of the producer.
Kind of
He,
similar how, Power Rangers films in New Zealand almost exclusively for similar reasons.
Right.
Farscape is filmed in New Zealand for that as well.
And Lord of the Rings is filmed in New Zealand.
I don't know if that's because it was cheaper, but for that one.
I think we went from spaghetti westerns to Kiwi fantasy.
Ooh. New genre unlocked.
I'm not a fan of kiwi fruit, but the birds I like.
I'm okay
Not to
for
eat,
either.
they're just cute.
But So the reason why we bring this up is If the Good, the Bad, the Ugly is the most famous Western out there, probably one of the equally just as famous, but not as famous. This is the B plus of the A plus route for this is the Magnificent Seven. It's good. It gets remade 4 times. Has at least one TV show that I know of starring Ron Perlman of all people in that.
Ooh.
It only lasted 2 seasons, but I actually really liked it. Now, this is where we start getting into a weird Japanese influence for it. See, back in the 50s and 60s, a famous director came around called Akira Kurosawa, who has made probably like you can trace some of the most famous films in history back to Akira Kurosawa's work. The Forbidden Palace, I think, is one, and that's Star Wars is tied to that. Another one that he does is Rashomon. You can trace that. Yojimbo as the lone wandering samurai. There's tons of that. And for our purposes of this tale today, we have famously the 7 Samurai.
Now, I do want to step in just for a second here
Yeah.
and just make sure it's clear that all of these amazing cinema that Leo has just mentioned, Kurosawa did first, and then we here in the West did later. So Star Wars, obviously after Kurosawa. Magnificent Seven, beat for beat, 7 Samurai.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We love turning movies that other people have made into awesome movies. So
A Ringu into Ring.
yeah.
That one was wickedly fast in its turnaround, if I'm being honest.
Very quick.
The Japanese one comes out, and then you get the Americanized one, like, I think a couple years later. It's like...
It is not long.
It's like, hold on, guys. Let it simmer.
I think it also just goes to show that if something just really just kicks off that well enough, you're gonna have someone just trying to feed off a little bit on that. Let's get a little bit of that pot. I want to see what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I will admit, The Ring got me. I thought it was a Western creation first,
Dude,
I hadn't
Most
heard
people
about Ringu, and then I figured it out, and I was like, oh, okay, this is crazy. Another couple really good Kurosawa films, just to kind of bring it back. I mean, Sanjuro is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Throne of Blood is incredible. These are kind of the highlights. In my opinion, all of their movies are fantastic. But there's so many good Kurosawa films.
Oh, there's so many of them. This is I would describe Kurosawa as being the Spielberg of the 50s at that point.
Spielberg
he
wishes.
Gold on that.
Spielberg could never.
Spielberg could never do that.
Hot take. D&Daine hot take. Here we go.
Although, to be fair, there's original movies that Steven Spielberg that's made that people have been trying to rip off as well for that.
100%. So, I think Stand By Me's gotten a couple of remakes, hasn't it?
Yeah. Stand By Me has. No one's touching Jurassic Park, but that's just because it's expensive to make.
Right.
I don't got animatronics money.
Yeah, that's crazy animatronics money. I don't have puppetry animatronics money.
Plus the first Jurassic Park.
At least not dinosaur size.
At least, I mean, Jurassic Park is like a perfect movie. It still holds up today. It's so good.
It really is.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's one of my favorites. Period.
Duel, Jaws, those kind of suspenseful horror films type things. How many times that's been covered? But yeah, so back to the point. Here is Kurosawa. He makes the Seven Samurai, and after people have been watching this, they think it's an amazing take. There was a bidding war to get the rights to make a US version of that.
Do you know how much they eventually paid out?
Yeah, I'm trying to
'Cause I don't.
remember. I do know it got crazy. Yul Brynner, the actor who was famous for King and I, was actually one of the people who ended up getting being part of that bidding war for it.
Huh.
But yeah, it was a hot take, and once they had it, that's when they decided to turn it into a western. The themes for it have not changed though. You have the short end of the Magnificent Seven, which is also the short end of Seven Samurai. A group of farmers and peasants have been just being trashed by local bandits. When they're desperate and they need help, so they go out to see if they can find hire any kind of just a wanderer or someone that can, like a mercenary, someone that can help them out, and they don't have much. It's pittance, and so a lot of people shun them because they're not going to risk their lives for this measly money that these peasants have barely scraped together. Except one person sees the nobility of it, and that person becomes the sort of de facto leader. And he's like, and it's always something to the extent of, I've never been paid for a good money for my work. I've never paid an entire village's life savings for my work. I'll help you. I will do this. And he recruits 6 other people to manage to help him out for one reason or another. And you usually this is where archetypes become very important. We'll see this more if you want a modern sort of take of the archetypes that you bump into, you'll see that all the times in a Super Sentai film or Power Rangers. You have your Red Ranger, which is the leader.
Mm-hmm.
You have the smart guy or the planning guy. You have the heart, the one who's trying to keep everyone together, and you have just the big guy, the muscular guy. And in Seven Samurai and such, they have sort of an interesting series of takes for that. In the Magnificent Seven, one of their big experts is always a person who's an expert with knives. Everyone else is using guns. He chooses to use knives, and he's twice as deadly than everybody else. In Seven Samurai, you have the just really aggressive new guy who wants to just prove his worth on it, and you have one like that in the Magnificent Seven as well. But that take gets kind of weirded out. In the original film, it was the youngest, this young gun who wants to prove himself as much that he can hang out with these big boys. And in the remake, where it had like an all-star cast, they had not a new person on there. What they had is someone who's seen as the outsider to their group, which they had Native American, be one of the Magnificent Seven for this. And so they changed it out for it.
Something I find really interesting in this character, this archetype, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kikucho is the character's name in Seven Samurai, and he passes himself off initially as a samurai.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's sort of kind of a reveal. Like, you get the feeling that the others kind of already knew, but to the audience, it is this huge reveal that this person, pretending to be a samurai, this roughshod, kind of crazy sort of type of samurai, wasn't actually one, and that he had defeated some elderly nobleman and kind of taken their seal to prove that he was an actual samurai. Which I just find very interesting. Like, you have this guy who, for all intents and purposes, is not a samurai, but desperately wants to be one, and so has literally done anything to put themselves in this position where they can pass themselves off as one.
Oh, yeah. Then there's always the old soldier who's seen it all, who tries to military tactics. And I don't remember if it's the same in the original Seven Samurai, but but I know in the Magnificent Seven, they start teaching the peasants how to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a part.
And that's touched upon in Seven Samurai as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Because like like Dane was saying, it's the he's presented with the everything that the town has, literally, and he's like, you know what, we don't have enough people, but let's see what we can do, and kind of rallies everybody to put some defenses together, and that's one of the themes that carries over very nicely to the Magnificent Seven and all of its variations.
Mhm. And with that, one of the things that they do that's always in all the reinterpretations of the story, that the village gets attacked and the seven get to show how skilled that they are. These all seven of these guys have some kind of down on their luck weird background, but they are almost experts in their field and manage to take out as many soldiers as they can, and they still run back to the other soldiers they're fighting against, run back to wherever whoever's their hierarchy, whoever's their
The
lord,
boss.
or whoever's their boss is. And in the meantime, they take all their weapons and such that were left from everybody else who was defeated, and start handing it out to the peasants so that they can practice and learn how to defend themselves for it. Because even they know, realistically speaking, seven against an army of thousands, yeah, that's a numbers game. You just can't hold up to that.
Yeah,
And they know they may not have the best soldiers, but they can teach some good defense.
Yep.
it's all about emphasizing the smarter, not harder.
Hmm.
It really is, and really just trying to figure out to work with what you actually got. Because God, there are so many makeshift things you just had to always put in together
Hmm.
to even have a chance.
Yeah, and so this is a story that has carried itself over. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because now you have a Eastern or Japanese story being converted very easily into a Western story. And that Western story specifically getting into a spaghetti Western because that was an Italian film. Um, in the original one, ironically enough, it was a Mexican village that they had to protect. In the remake, it's a small mining colony that's barely holding itself from the 2016 remake for that. And in the original, it was a small, I think, peasant, just a farming community that's barely struggling by because they're losing tons and tons of money to this. And I think they make it a point that the bandits that are stealing from their, and it's almost the bandits that are attacking the town aren't even going to use whatever resources are in that town. They're going to sell it elsewhere because they can make even more money elsewhere. So they're not even taking it for their own use, for their own, like in the peasant villages with rice, and they're not even taking the rice. They're selling off the rice to other people.
Something I find kind of interesting, if my memory of the history of that time is correct. So Japan for a long time measured their monetary system in rice, in koku is what they
Hmm.
called it. And so I think in Seven Samurai, not only are they stealing rice, which is food, which allows people to feed themselves and what have you, but it's, I believe, at that time also considered their money. So they're kind of getting a twofer as far as that's concerned, just
Hmm.
because the money of the time was food.
Yeah, it's the similar to what Romans would do. We have the word salary, which is based on the Roman word for salt, because they would pay people in salt. And if you know anything about old world healing, salt's super important until we get to about the 1910s to 20s when we start perfecting cannery and ways of preserving food. Like
Hmm.
salt's not a problem for us now. We can just go get food and it's already got enough salt for our bodies to keep. But back then, oh no, you needed to have as much salt as possible. It was an important trade. Same with rice. Rice is the only is can be lasting for a couple of years before without any kind of spoilage, as long as it doesn't get wet.
Yeah, and no preservations or preservatives needed either. Just it's
Hmm.
naturally like once it's dried out and all that, you're pretty much good.
Yeah, and so like they're not only taking their food, they're also taking their money. So they're taking and they're double dipping on this. So this is introduces these themes into the Western genres in Western cinema. Now, the reason why this is important is first off, one of the things that I unfortunately will always praise the Magnificent Seven a little over the Seven Samurai. It's only an hour and a half long. Seven Samurai
Oh.
is a long movie.
Oh, I'm sorry that you couldn't just wrap up an epic in a quick 30 minutes for you, Geek Scorpio.
Now,
Man, oh, how dare they tell this incredibly thought out, nuanced story. Sorry it was too much for you, sir.
now, pre 1990, you could find one that was 50 minutes shorter.
True.
That
Hey,
being said, you're losing a hell of a lot of context.
Well,
yeah. So yeah, it's
it
a
is long
great.
though. To
It
be fair,
is.
to be fair to you, Geek Scorpio, it is a
It is
long movie. I
Yeah.
can recognize that.
Oh, what is it? At some point, I want to go back and watch the original Frankenstein movie. Apparently, it's not even like an hour long.
It feels like forever.
It feels like forever, but it's not an hour. It's not even an hour long for that
I
movie.
really like most of that book / movie,
Mhm.
but man, the middle just kills me every single time.
Mm.
I digress.
Just the slowest pacing ever. It's like, I know we're trying to build a monster. Are you sure that we can't just paint a wall and watch that? I feel like it could, give us a little like wow factor.
Honestly,
there.
after the monster is made and before, the things that happen towards the end, I don't want to spoil a super old book and movie for anybody out there, even though we are a spoiler heavy podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it just drags. Like, oh, you see a little girl. Oh,
Mhm.
now you've murdered her. Whoopsie doodle. That's too bad. Okay, well,
Mhm.
can we wrap this thing up? Nope, there's more. Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
sure.
that's the one with Gene Wilder, right?
You know what? Even that one has that moment where like the monster's created, some random crazy bullshit happens, and then
Yep.
they do putting on the Ritz, and putting on the Ritz
Thank
is
you.
great.
I was
But
gonna
until
actually
that
go in with
point, it's
that.
just like, oh my god, who cares? To be fair, before people come for me, don't even at me or do. I don't care. Get in the comments. Why not? Mary Shelley's amazing. She does amazing work. I
Mhm.
love her work, but
Mhm.
holy crap, that middle part just kills me every time.
Yeah.
I digress.
I also thought it was more exciting to learn that Frankenstein monster knows how to speak French. That's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
What's the part français?
Yeah. People forget that part.
And I was like, well, bonjour to you too, buddy.
So, but that's the thing with this one is actually kind of like Frankenstein and Dracula and various old stories like that. There is no, how do I want to put this? There is no, even though this is a genre specific, westerns are a genre specifically for the United States because it's western, and anime influences are specifically for Japan. You will start seeing these cross patterns with these stories because the story itself is not one that is pigeonholed to being part of this nation. This entire thing in Canada, you'd still get the same storyline going through.
Oh yeah, bud. Canada 7A.
But yeah, you can do it in different countries and such, and this is where you have this big influence for it. So now westerns are starting to get moved into anime, and anime is starting to become an influence at least the 70s and 80s and the 90s, and we've talked about that before. So here's where we get into where anime likes to go back and just explore with different genres for it. Sometimes you'll have a sports anime, which is about a sports team for it, and they can make an epic of a TV show. When most of the time we get one movie and hope for the best. You have these other genres for it. So watching a western as a genre being done as an anime is a trip at some and even the reason why we bring up Seven Samurai because this is where your connection between anime and westerns come into play. Kurosawa is huge, and his influence can be seen all over the patterns of anime. So why not do one that's about the Seven Samurai? So why not do one based similarly to the Magnificent Seven and explore those genres for it? Like there's a Samurai 7 which is based on Seven Samurai, set in a set way in the future.
It's like a neo future steampunk.
Yeah, a neo future steampunk. That is hard to explain, but I can explain the story of Seven Samurai pretty well. And from what I've heard, that thing is an amazing animated.
Very good. Almost as good as the original movie.
I bought it on Xbox Live Arcade.
Wow.
Like a
Wow.
bunch of episodes. I think I have like 7 of them that were like 80 Microsoft points each or some BS back when.
But then you also have sort of these Western themes popping up into anime. My personal favorite of all of them is got to be Cowboy Bebop. There
Oh,
is watching Cowboy Bebop. If you've watched a Western, you know where they're going at with these.
it's the best. In my opinion, it's the best. I understand. So, what I find interesting around this time, there are three that I kind of view, that I refer to fondly as the trinity of spaghetti space westerns.
Hmm.
And each of them tackles it in a little bit different way, right? You've got Cowboy Bebop, which we've mentioned, which in my opinion is the better of them. That being said, they're all good, so watch all of them if you're so
Mm.
inclined, if you like the genre. Trigun, which is just phenomenal and
Hell yeah,
very
dude.
of its time, very goofy. They've just
Mhm.
recently remade it, I know, but the original Trigun is very 90s, early thousands
Yeah,
in a good way.
in the best of
Um, Especially where it's like super silly up front, and then halfway through it's like, here's the twist. Like,
Mhm.
well, now
Oh
we're
yeah.
serious.
And
Um,
if you want us to talk about more about Trigun, it was one of our staples when we talked about Cerebus syndrome way back when
yes,
last season.
go check out that as well, and
So
other
check out that.
podcasts that
Um,
we're on. The third being Outlaw Star,
yeah.
which is very interesting because it does take sort of more of a techno magic sort of stance,
No,
where
you're
yeah.
there
right.
is both magic, technology, and it's a space western. So like, but the three of these, in my opinion, really set the tone and set the pace for a lot of other shows.
Hmm.
In terms of animation, right? Without them, we don't get Grenadier. Without them, we don't get Coyote Ragtime Show. Without
Hmm.
them, more on these in a moment. We don't get
Hmm.
Gunnex Sword. We don't get, oh my God, there's so many that you can, Desert Punk.
Oh
Uh,
god, yeah.
I know, right? But all of these,
And
in my opinion, can trace their lineage back to these three, like, titans of shows.
And these three types of shows are not just we're not saying that is hyperbole. Cowboy Bebop was what a mainstay in Adult Swim in the
Still is.
'90s,
It
and
still
so like
is.
it still is. It's
They
got
still
such a
play
huge
it.
That show is
it's
like
too good to leave.
It
it's
is.
I'm pretty sure it's like sub 24 episodes, and yet it's been running non-stop for over 20 years on an American network, if that
Yeah.
tells you anything.
26 episodes of pure amazingness. And I understand. I've got friends who are like, it's mid, it's meh, we don't care about it. And they're just wrong. And that's okay. It's okay to be wrong. No,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
have opinions. Don't mind.
You
I
can
just
have
might disagree.
Yeah,
opinions.
It's
you're
like it's
allowed to have
fine.
wrong opinions. That's okay.
If you think Cowboy Bebop is mid, leave me a comment. We'll chat.
It's like we understand it's okay for other people to have bad taste, and we will just not hang out with you.
I'll hang out with you. We'll just argue.
Legitimately, my dad wanted me to try to explain anime to him, and he's huge. I knew
Oh
he
my
was huge into westerns,
god.
and so he's like, if I was trying to watch one, which should I start? I go Cowboy Bebop, hands
Yeah.
down.
Yep.
It's
Nope.
and with its western feel, he could understand the themes kicking in right then and there, and
It's
it's just a good
digestible
bench one.
enough by
Mhm.
non-anime. Sorry to interrupt on you, Leo.
No, you're fine.
It's definitely digestible enough by non-anime and Japanese interested viewers,
Hmm.
that you can definitely sit somebody down and go, hey, if you watch nothing else, this is one of the ones you could watch and kind of understand. I think there are some others, especially in recent times,
In recent times, it's
that are
easier
more
now.
approachable. But I mean, in the 90s and early thousands, that would be my go-to as well. I think most people understand like a noir story. I think most people understand a western story, and this kind of does both. And then you can kind of throw in sci-fi in there as well, I
Yeah.
suppose.
And cool jazz.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like cool jazz?
Like, I'm not a jazz guy. Don't get
Oh,
me wrong, though. I love 3, 2, 1, let's jam. I mean, let's go.
Oh yeah,
It's like, but
take us
that
away.
opening.
Yoko Kano and the seatbelts can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned.
It's like,
That's certified platinum on its own, and
Oh,
it will never break.
so
I'm,
good.
I'm pretty sure Tank was just a reminder that even some people who say they don't like jazz like jazz.
And that's even like,
And here's the proof.
it's even emphasized more so now too when you look at things like Persona 5. That entire soundtrack is jazz inspired,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
and
God,
it's
Persona 5 is so good.
amazing. I mean, I can't gush enough about that soundtrack.
Now, Trigun itself is as a western, just feels more like a western. It's got a
True.
desert setting.
Mhm.
It's got You legitimately have bandits. Hell, some of these guys' wardrobe is that classic
It's a duster, man.
dusters and so
Yeah.
and
It is definitely less space western, though it is still a space
yeah, it's
western.
still a
I
space
will
western.
argue that. Still a space western, but less of a space western than Bebop and Outlaw Star are.
Mhm.
Because both of them do the space a little bit more. It's more in the forefront, whereas this takes place on a planet in space, and there's some like technological weirdness that we don't normally have.
Mhm.
I absolutely agree. Way more western.
Visually more Western.
Mhm.
Just basically your classic gunman shootout, the expert gunman that's running around.
Quick draw McGraw.
Hmm. And then you have Outlaw Star, which Outlaw Star feels like I want to say like a frontier traveling, where they
Mhm.
go from place to place, and you can see this. Now, if you want to know a weird Western sort of association with that, Star Trek back in the day was pitched as a Western. As Gene Roddenberry described it to his producers, this is a wagon train in space.
Interesting.
And that's how you ended up pitch Star Trek back in the day. So it would be like a wagon train going from place to place. They have a little bit of an adventure, and maybe they move on. Maybe some things come back, maybe some things don't. Who knows? But yeah, so like these are the three pinnacle ones, especially in the 90s or so, that sort of start off that whole anime that's going to be westerns on that.
And they're not the first to do either space western or just western, right? Like there
Mhm.
are some that do predate these shows, and they should be acknowledged, I think. I know what is it? Space Adventure Cobra
Oh yeah.
is like a salaryman
Mhm.
gets like goes into a life of adventure in the stars. Like it's very
Well, and he's
silly.
wanted, and he's like changed
Mhm.
his appearance
Yeah.
so he can dodge those that are after him, and they're outlaws trying to find and take him for a bounty. I mean, it is
Mhm.
straight up a space western. That
It
is
is
what that
100%. And
is.
it came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not even one that's associated with like even as the Western cartoon audience, we have things like Brave Star, which is literally they have a planet called Space Texas. That's the name, Space Texas.
Don't mess with Space Texas.
Don't mess with
Hey,
Space
hey, what
Texas.
about Space Australia? You got
That's a
Jason
different.
the Guinea Force.
True.
The spy skin use.
If this keeps going, I'm just gonna think of G Gundam, where everything is Neo Tokyo, Neo
Jesus, G
Mexico,
Gundam,
Neo
man.
whatever.
Oh
We'll just put
god.
Neo in front of it. It's the same.
Mhm.
It's the same thing.
It's New France. It's
It's
like old France,
new.
but we have robots.
And also, everything around it is destroyed and crumbling into gross because
Mhm.
Earth is a battlefield for a giant cosmic, well, not even cosmic, just a giant, brawl fest.
Mhm.
Love a good
And all this
battlefield.
started a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, with the Dark Gundam that got renamed that from the Devil Gundam because Americans can't handle that.
It's the 80s.
Yeah.
That,
Yep.
that one was the 90s, my dude.
Still though.
No, yeah, well, yeah, but you think about how Dungeons and Dragons had to change around for all their stuff for
Oh,
the
yeah.
same
Well,
thing.
of
Yeah,
course. Satan.
and that can be discussed in another podcast
Let's
about
go.
from the previous one that we talked about classes in Dungeons and Dragons back in season 1, and that's a live broadcast that we did at ESGC.
You want to see more of that? Let us know.
So we do see other influences on it. One of the, at least on a video game scale, we've seen Red Dead Redemption and the Red Dead series. That's straight up a Western.
2 is
They
so
even
good.
have a straight up spaghetti Western. They even have the twanging soundtrack, which I wish I could have because I love it. But if I wanted to go with the classic anime Western, Wild Arms is
Mm-hmm.
that in spades.
Agreed.
Mhm.
So good.
Yep, and they have the creators are doing a new take on Wild Arms through a double Kickstarter they did a couple years ago, which I kickstarted the hell out of because it also was the double Kickstarter was also with the Shadow Heart's successor
Mhm.
called
Oh wow.
Pennyblood. So yeah, I can't get enough of either of those. So yeah, gimme.
Can have some more. I'll take it.
Can please
Uh,
has many's.
He says Vinny. So do you guys recall any other Grenadier? I haven't seen any of that.
Oh, Grenadier's okay. Let me paint you a picture here. of what Grenadier is, because it
Oh
is
boy.
of its time and wild. So you got our main character, right? I honestly don't remember her name, but let's just say she's physically gifted, but also talented. She's busty, we'll say. That's a polite way to say that.
She got boobums.
She do. She walks around
Mhm.
packing a 6-iron. That's a revolver, 6
Mhm.
shots in it. For those of you who don't know, and a floppy hat and this crazy outfit. And
Mhm.
she reloads this gun not by having a pouch or having a pocket. I mean, I think she does have a pouch actually, but it's not part of this. She's got a pocket. She doesn't just reload the shells like you would a normal revolver. No. That's way too mainstream. That's way too commonplace. She holds bullets in her cleavage and she rotates rapidly, and they fire out of her cleavage and she catches them in the gun, and that's how she reloads her gun a lot in that show. This is probably
God.
2005, I want to say.
You
That
are
sounds about right.
insanely close. 2004.
Oh, so close. So yeah, it's very Wild West themed. There's cowboy hat, gunslinging characters, and then you have the main character who just reloads her gun with her cleavage.
Also, there's a guy with a katana.
That's true. Yeah, she is followed by like a pseudo samurai type character as well.
Oh,
Full circle
Yeah.
here with Seven Samurai and Magnificent
Mhm.
Seven in that respect.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Tying East and West together, right? You got a cowboy and you got a samurai.
Oh
But I mean, like,
man, that is early 2000s like nobody's business.
it's very
Rising
fan
Sam, the
servicey.
Samurai Gunman.
It's very fun. It's just very silly.
It's fan servicey.
100%. Doesn't
Mhm.
take itself very seriously. The world is about as well built as you could expect, but it's still just a fun little time. Absolutely ridiculous, though.
And it's very much a Western.
Yes, it's very much so a Western.
Colorful one, but a Western nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Westerns can be just colorful. That's really just sort of, especially when you're in animated, you have a palette. You can just choose to use that. We don't need dry brown colors the whole time, guys.
We don't need Grand Theft Auto 4?
No.
not Grand Theft Auto 4.
Sorry, that game was just one tone.
Though I will say, speaking of gritty brown tones, Desert Punk, another
Punk, yeah.
animation based out of the Western kind of persuasion. You've got people wearing, cloaks and ponchos, wielding guns in a desert, very brown, for those who may not have seen it. And it's all about people trying to survive in a desert.
And the main character wears a gas mask perpetually.
Yep,
Yeah, that's the punk part of the Desert Punk.
true.
It changes your look.
Oh, because of Daft Punk. I get it.
Yes.
You know, we're
I'm-
gonna say
I'm
yes and move
obviously
on.
kidding.
Yeah.
God.
Nope. It's totally serious. You heard it here first, folks.
Nope. Okay. Yep. I said it. Therefore, it is. Therefore, it's canon.
Brandon will die on this hill right
Yeah.
now.
Feel
There are
so
many hills
strongly
I
about
will
it.
die on. This is one of them.
Go ahead and at Tomatoman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's TM80MAN on Twitter because that's what it's called.
Oh,
Word.
Gun Frontier is one I just learned about the other day. And it's very much a Western samurai story.
Oh.
But it was like short-lived. It only lasted for I think one season, and even the manga was. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. A lot of these genres that we're seeing right now for animes, spaghetti western style animes or Western style animes, usually were mangas back in the day from the 70s and remade, and that kind of makes sense because that was the spaghetti western was big back then.
Now, okay, this is a stretch, but go with me on this one.
Okay.
I know on its base it would not normally be considered, but would we consider Lupin the Third to be close?
I would.
Ooh, that's
It doesn't take place in the Wild West, but there's enough of like a mashing of genres in that
But-
show.
Well,
I
and
mean,
you've got the eclectic, weird set of characters that don't that shouldn't mesh well but do, and that's kind of got that dynamic of the seven strangers of different classes, if
Yeah.
you will.
That's
I would
kind of what I
totally
was
say so.
thinking.
But Lupin the Third always just comes off as just like a heist group on most
So,
occasions.
That's fair. It might be closer to a heist anime.
so
Right.
I'm going to the reason why I'm going to shoot this down, and this is the only reason, is because it's legitimately based on Arsène Lupin.
Arsène Lupin, yeah.
Arsène Lupin. Forgive me for our French fans that if I got that name wrong.
I
Ironically, I am also reading the book right now, so
Really?
can't
Okay,
pronounce it.
fascinating.
Won't even try.
Oh,
but yeah, no, straight up the original Gentleman Thief.
Sure.
okay.
But
And so like that's where that gets different. However,
Goemon is a
that's-
samurai.
Goemon is a samurai, and Jigen is a
And then
straight up a
noir
gunman,
Mm-hmm.
and who prefers a 6-shooter than more than anything else. So you can see tones, you can see things connecting into the dots for it.
Right.
And I think weirdly enough, if we're counting any kind of like science fiction, would you say Firefly of all cases?
Oh,
Would be-
100% a
100%.
space
Oh,
western.
absolutely.
Are you kidding me? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
If-
that is
yes,
true.
The only
yes.
thing that could make Firefly more Western would be to put in Clint Eastwood.
Look, dude,
1,000
they're
times,
wearing dusters.
yes.
It's a Western.
Meh. I
It's a
stand by my sta- I've seen people wear dusters who can't be a Western.
Hold on. But
Irvine.
how's this? Even though these have space travel to all the planets, these still go city to city by wagon.
Yep.
I'll also note that there's literally at least one episode in that short run show where they're literally cowboys.
Yep.
That is
So-
true. They are
So
literally
it is a
cowboys.
space Western. It
Also-
is
And it has a
100% spaghetti
frontier.
Western.
Scorpio, I've got to disagree with you on Irvine. Irvine himself is cowboy, is western, even if Final Fantasy VIII is not.
I would
Just
agree
him.
with that.
Him alone.
Also, he doesn't have to be a good shot. He just has to be able to shoot.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're just like before we started this cast, just talking about what about certain characters? We're just like, no, this person belongs in a Western. They're just not in the Western.
They just haven't
Yeah.
gotten there yet.
Because we were just talking about like from JoJo.
Ice Shield 21 has a
Whole
whole
Horse?
Western theme.
Yeah,
here.
Whole Horse.
Horse.
Yeah,
Horse.
yeah,
Whole Horse,
but
yeah.
but I was thinking if it was characters, it's like we can't not just have without having Kid from the Gunslingers and Ice Shield 21. That dude is literally a quick draw expert.
That's his thing in football gear.
Yep.
Yeah, but I love that. Not to mention that when oddly enough, when the team went to America, also the Western team just happened to be in America too. Oddly enough, Texas of all places. And I was like, "What are you guys doing here?" "Oh, we're just here for our football training camp in a ranch."
Was it
Yep,
regular
right on the
Texas or
thing.
space Texas? I need to know.
No, this is
No, this is
more
regular
common.
Texas, not space Texas. They got a
Okay.
San Antonio.
We
Let's
gotta clarify.
that's true. We have a number of Texases we got to get through.
do-
This must be more of a commentary then on how the spaghetti Western has influenced anime even beyond just as a genre, but even just representation in others in which it wouldn't make sense. I mean,
Right?
because there's a lot of elements too that even with Xenogears kind of applies.
Oh yes, yeah, I can see that in Xenogears. And doing that.
I mean, Tifa Lockhart, while not a cowboy, for the record, does wear a Western-inspired outfit when in a flashback when she's younger.
Yeah, when she's 16.
Does she have a cowboy hat and everything?
She straight
She
up
does.
has a cowboy hat and a vest with tassels.
It's cow print too.
It is legit.
Ha!
Oh, how have you not seen these things, dude?
There's a lot of FF7 that I'm just got a gap in my memory for. Okay.
Oh,
Oh
God.
man.
Oh,
No,
buddy.
Downside, quick thing. Yeah, I only got to partway through disc 1 in FF7, and then my game was taken away from me.
okay, so you never got out of
Not my
Midgar.
parents,
That
just gone.
explains it.
Just gone.
I've legitimately bought that game like 30 times. The
Dude,
original Final
same.
Fantasy VII. I'm pretty sure I've owned almost every version that game has existed.
Dude, seriously.
It's not
I-
a smart choice, but it's the choice I've made.
and it's not and it's not a wrong choice either. Let's keep
True.
that in mind.
Very
So, I mean, I have got no room to talk. I've bought Fallout 2 like 16, like at least 4 different times.
true.
That's all.
And then Zombie has absolutely no
God.
room to talk
Alan
with
Wake.
how
Oh
Mhm.
Jesus!
Alan Wake. Um, I guess the further out we go with members of GTP, the less people that can tell you know about this.
Look, we're all really bad with our money, okay? That's what we're getting at here.
It's like at least we all know what we're obsessed with. So
we get
we're
what
all-
they call choices.
you know,
We're all children
know-
with adult money. There's a problem here.
That's a mood.
it's like we help contribute to that force of toy buying worldwide.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think it's very interesting how, like for the West, I think we see a lot of crossover between Western animation and video games and, the Eastern themes, so samurai or ninja as an example. Whereas we do see kind of the converse of that in the fact that a lot of anime seems to be interested in Westerns.
Yeah.
They get uh I find this very funny, and this is probably not the correct sequence of events, but they get Samurai 7, which is a animated version of Magnificent 7, which is a remake of Seven Samurai. Probably, once again, not correct. They probably just went to the source, right?
Dude, Gesundheit, bless you.
I know,
or
I know.
maybe not. So the thing is with that, they take when you have that sort of genre of it, there's some people will adjust genres for a remake of something with a different caliber for it.
That's fair. I will say Seven Samurai does hold up, I think, in my opinion, a little bit closer to Magnificent 7 than it does Seven Samurai.
Which kind of makes sense because
Samurai 7, Magnificent 7, Seven
Samurai
Samurai.
7,
Just to make sure I've got that
Samurai
right.
yeah.
So many sevens.
Because they just changed the order of the words for the anime.
Jackpot, dude.
But no, sometimes you bump into a weird situation where one version of X subject happens to be the version that you want to go with on the basis that like for example, the song All Along the Watchtower, everyone, including everyone who has heard it, knows how amazing it is. But most people have heard the Jimi Hendrix version, not the original one made by Bob. No, I can't think of his name. Oh, it's gonna bother me.
Bob Newhart, Bob Saget, Bob the Builder.
Bob the Builder. No, it's But anyway, the song "All Along the Watchtower" is performed by Jimi Hendrix. It's the original one is though Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan. That's what it was.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Bob Dylan makes the original "All Along the Watchtower." Jimi Hendrix makes a remake, but he loves the remake so much he just stops making. He doesn't perform it very often when he gets a chance to back in the day because he just wants to hear because he thinks the Hendrix version is superior or at least easier to listen to or better off on it.
So there's actually a
pretty good.
modern example of that in the song Hurt.
By Johnny Cash.
Well, not by Johnny Cash, but
No.
but the moment he did a cover, the original artist was like, "Nope, that's his now."
Yeah, now you also get that in different genres as well. What is it? There was for the Magnificent Seven, most people will go with the Magnificent Seven versus the Seven Samurai because it's sadly easier to swallow of a film.
It's easier to digest for sure.
It's like easier to digest. It's an
Because
hour
they're
and 30
weak.
minutes versus having to for a 3-hour epic. Now I think a lot gets lost in that, but if you're going to remake one, that's the way to do it. And who knows how many Conan the Barbarian, just because Arnold Schwarzenegger played Conan once back in the 80s, that's what they sort of define as his strong Austrian accent is just what they have as the default tone of what of how Conan's supposed to sound.
You know what's wild about that? That's the first Marvel movie.
Yeah, it's the first official Marvel movie is Conan. Conan was the Barbarian's owned by Marvel.
Also, the first Marvel movie was Howard the Duck.
No.
Oh,
no, Conan came.
No,
way
Conan
predates
it.
I don't know about way, but it did come first.
Roundabout way, because Marvel owned the rights to do Conan the Barbarian in their comics, and they make the Conan the movie, I believe, 82. And is when that gets released.
I think
and
Howard
it starts
the Duck was like 85 or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, it releases it starts the big trend of sword and sorcery films in the 80s.
I might want to say feature film, right? Because I think there was a Doctor Strange that came out in the late 70s.
Yeah,
You
there
know
was
what?
one.
Yeah, because there's
And then there was
also
a
like
Spider-Man
earlier
too in
Captain
the
America
late
stuff
70s. No, not
where
Yeah.
Captain
he.
America.
No, there
That
was
was in the
Captain
80s.
America.
Yep.
He had a motorcycle helmet instead of the cap.
Hmm. But anyway, that's a different subject for a different day.
Back with us later for a new podcast about.
Yeah.
So that being said, you just see these westerns in the desert settings, or the lone gunman who needs to protect people is not uncommon than abandoned the big forests areas and or mountainous forest areas, and then the lone samurai who has to go out and try to protect the town. These themes are not individual for westerns; you just see them in Western literature a lot. However, these themes are also internationally done. Probably the most famous lone wanderer story is Mad Max, especially Road Warrior. He just ends up in a place, stuff happens, and then he leaves.
Road Warrior kind of defined that entire mentality for a film too.
Hmm.
I
And
like Beyond Thunderdome.
well, we have to get beyond Thunderdome first.
What about Waterworld?
You say that for an post-apocalyptic episode, and
Look,
yes, there
I'll
is a
see you all.
one for
I'll
that.
see you all there.
Oh, that being said, before we, I don't know if there's anything more we want to touch on this Western subject on that. Honestly, just that its influences can be seen in different places on that.
Gun Cross Sword didn't know what it wanted to be,
True, but it was definitely Western inspired.
but it was certainly something. It just didn't know what.
It's so funny because now that you say gun cross sword out loud, that's probably how it's supposed to be said,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what I know of Japan.
Uh-huh.
But I've always said gun X sword because I was an itty bitty child when that game came out. Movie, anime. Oh my god, burning toast. I'm dying.
It's like it comes in all the series.
Dude, did you just
Ugh.
have a brain fart? It's pretty
I
stinky. I
did.
can smell it from over here.
Yeah, 100% I just did. But yeah, no, like gun cross sword is probably more correct. That makes sense.
It's Spy Cross Family, but everyone just says Spy Family.
Yeah, that's true.
I've always
we
heard
have,
of Spy X Family, but
we
I know
have
that's
dropped
wrong.
it. Yeah, is it Hunter Hunter or is it Hunter Cross Hunter
I
or
think
is it?
it's pronounced hiatus cross hiatus.
Oh, he can't help it. He's sick.
Look, now it's fair.
I thought it was 100 times Hunter.
Hunter times Hunter. Is that Hunter squared?
It's
Penguin?
Hunter multiplied by Hunter.
Yeah.
So if we take a Hunter by the gunslinger power,
Okay.
So is Hunter Hunter now hunted? I'm lost. Where are we? What time is it?
I don't know. No one knows. What else is there?
What else
I
is there?
feel like we're missing some. One that I just thought of. I do not speak Spanish, and I'm going to apologize up the front of this.
okay.
So I took Spanish in junior high school, so I'm doing pretty all right. But El Cazador de la Bruja is a Western with like supernatural elements.
I think you actually got his name correct. For
I was
that,
gonna say
Cody.
the pronunciation sounded pretty good because I took French in high school and they have a lot of similarities in their that.
Like,
I'll admit, I studied Japanese and I'm white. Okay, give me a break here on the Spanish.
Look, I do the best I can.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, man, isn't that why you keep me and Leo around?
yeah, I mean, ElPenguin over here has L in his name.
I don't think that's why we keep you around, but thank you for being here.
It's like we help cover the genres all together. Like, you know what? Oddly enough, I was going. So I was sent a TikTok on how America represents Mexicans
Oh no.
versus how Japan represents Mexicans,
Oh no.
and it's like, you know what? Japan westerns. There's a good chance if they're gonna have a Mexican character, that's when they introduce them. And I mean, like, with the whole stereotypical, like, sombrero, poncho, but they will even, like, I need to check out the new Digimon series, because apparently, Mimi's Digimon, I forget what her name was.
Palmon.
Palmon.
Mhm.
Is it Palmon? Yeah, I just
Yeah.
remember it being a giant cactus.
Okay,
I have
no.
a weird thing.
Apparently, there was some change that I didn't know happened recently in the remake, but now their cactus is Panchomon. That does have a poncho, razor sharp teeth, and it boxes like a motherfucker now.
There's a lot of Digimon that are being introduced in the remake that were not privy in the original. For
Mhm.
example, everybody gets a mega form, not just Tai and Matt.
Oh
So
my god, right?
and they're all in the show like that too. Like so yeah, like you get to see Anjouamon go to Omega form, which is just basically Falcor with
Yeah,
horns
never
Oh
ending
my
and
story.
pink,
god.
and it's dope.
It's pretty dope. It's not gonna lie, it is pretty dope.
Oh, and Omnimon or Omegamon in the Japanese version appears in the show instead of just in the movie and specials.
God, he's the
God.
best Digimon.
I
But
love Omnimon, dude. Don't even get me going on
He's
No,
that.
my favorite. He's
Yeah,
absolutely my
straight up.
favorite.
no. Even after all these years, and no matter what list you find, it will always admit that number one Digimon, Omnimon's number one.
Like
Yeah.
Wergurumon's up there for me as well, but like it just how do you hold a candle to Omnimon, man? You just can't.
yeah.
I see us on our Digimon podcast coming
Yes.
2024.
Yeah, at this point,
We'll
we
have
just
to
need to
get
do
Liz
that
in on
one.
that too, because they had a whole set about Omnimon, and they had like 8 different Omnimon cards in that play set, and I'm like, I'm buying a whole
Yep.
box.
I
So I did.
legitimately did the same thing. I have an Omnimon deck for that game.
Oh, we're all
Um,
nerds. That's awesome.
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
But
we
don't
are.
don't feel bad about getting your Spanish wrong. There was a telenovela I got to watch called Aguilera Rojo, or no Roja, Aguilera Roja, which it translates to Red Eagle, which I saw like 2 episodes of it on Hulu. However, the best way I can describe it is 17th century Spanish Batman.
Wait, are you talking about? Are you talking about El Águila Rojo?
Aguilera Rojo, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that when I was sitting here, am I just yep, I'm watching Spanish Batman. Like it takes place in Spain, but he learns about ninjas. Like
Oh, so
No,
actual
that
Spanish.
like yeah,
yeah, no, that was full on. Spain wanted their own Batman.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Is it
They
bad of
wanted
me
their
to want
own
to call
Batman
it
and their own
Spanish?
Zorro, and they
don't
glued
No,
it together.
You know what's something I remember that was funny about that
Mhm.
is that it also came out around the same time as the Assassin's Creed movie, which he was also called La Agaral and was also placed in Spain.
Oh boy.
And that's like,
That's a
damn,
mess
it's like
and a
you.
half.
It's like you guys couldn't even go to another country. You just.
Anyway, before we get into a weird linguistics podcast, which is
Join us next time on
Next
our
time.
language
Um,
podcast.
It's
But
like next time
yeah.
when we talk about Los Japoneses de Mexico, it's like the Japanese Mexicans. Yes, the real connections. His,
So with that being said, yep, I think the themes are pretty internationally known. Unless anybody has anything else, I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
If you don't cut me off, I will talk about Bebop, Trigun, and Outlaw Star forever.
Nice, right.
I will do
Oh,
the
dude, with
same.
all of us here, it'll never end.
Yeah,
I
Bebop is my
love
jam.
Dude,
those
Trigun.
shows
Yeah.
so much.
and then he'll keep shaming our audience into watching the Seven Samurai.
Yeah, please. I will. I will absolutely. Magnificent Seven is great. Watch that first if you want to. But please, get yourself some culture. Sit down and watch the original. Yeah, I know it's long. Guess what? If you've rented it or if you have the DVD, you can pause that shit.
Mhm.
You don't have to watch it all in one go.
Yeah,
So-
don't.
I think there's
There's
an intermission maybe even in some versions of the film.
Yes.
It's like
So like
do people just not paste their stuff anymore?
I'm
No.
just
Well,
saying.
If you want one that's really hard pacing to get to, watch at some point. It's a comedy, and it's the longest comedy I've ever seen. It's a mad world. There's no.
God,
it takes on too
damn
long.
it.
There's no way you can keep that kind of comedy pacing going around.
True.
So, regarding Seven Samurai, the Criterion Collection has released a Blu-ray edition of this movie, 100% uncut, and includes documentaries on Kurosawa, and it is $24.99.
Well, I know what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black. If you're in the States, Black Friday's coming.
Yeah,
I
dude.
bet it'll go on sale.
That
I'll
is the
bet it
sale.
goes
It's
on
normally
sale then.
$50.
Oh,
I'm adding,
perfect then.
I'm adding
Yep.
this to my wish list right now, actually.
Done.
But yeah,
And it's like, I wonder if there should be like a gaming theaters presents live stream of the Seven Samurai.
I would.
ooh,
I
I'd
don't
be
want
there.
I don't want Criterion to come after me, so
Yeah, well,
We got ways we
The-
can do it.
we got ways.
I've watched movies on Twitch before, and not with them showing on screen, for the record.
Okay, so
It's
yes,
like-
I know exactly what that is.
It's like
Yes.
you can have the watch along. It's like, come join us. Finally get Dane's approval.
Well, yeah. I'm very disappointed in all of you.
I mean, to be fair, if you're wondering how much I love the Seven Samurai, even though I don't own the movie, I do own the Diablo clone knockoff of Seven Samurai. It is a legit. It's called it's something of darkness, but it is super interesting and weird. But it is Diablo set with the Seven Samurai.
You
I
have
love
me
that.
very intrigued.
In the meantime, our next episode will be available on December 1st. And at that point in time, I think we're going to go off and finally get around to finishing off the last chapter of the DC EAU's influence.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bunch of
jeez.
episodes that we've been meaning to get back to, and I think
Yeah.
now we're going to do that for some of December. That being said, thanks everybody for tuning in, and this is Gaming Theater Podcast logging out. Bye, everybody.
Go watch Cowboy Bebop and Seven Samurai. Bye.
Peace out.
Adios.
Gaming Theater Podcast is hosted, created, produced, and edited by Leo Garcia, the Geek Scorpio. Our music is A Drinking Game. Stock media provided by Stormwave Audio /Pond5. Our cover art is by Adam Parker. You can find him at ParkerGFX on Twitter. If you want to send us some money to help with these episodes, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingtheaterpresents. Want to send support that doesn't hit your wallet? Please leave a review with wherever you hear your podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. It really helps out. Thank you for listening.